facing opposition. God had a plan to bring his people back from Babylon and rebuild the temple and the walls of Jerusalem. However, for the tribes and the nations that surrounded the lands of Judah, this was a real threat and disturbance that will cost them economically and politically in the future. Regardless of the smooth departure from Babylon, the Jews now had to manage a constant future and purposeful opposition for rebuilding the holy city.
We're continuing the study on Ezra and Nehemiah, and as we noted last week, there are a lot of relevant and common issues with our time today. Talking about opposition and resistance to God. Rebuilding Jerusalem and the temple at that time wasn't so much a political as religious and spiritual issue. It was about restoring the recognition of God, his central place, restoring the base for a relationship with him. And this caused some serious fear and resistance, including all kinds of tactics, including infiltration.
I would admit I was really confused when I read this friendly proposition from the people to the Jews who were working on the wall. We read about it in Ezra chapter 4, verse 1 to 2. And I read, they said, let us help you build, because like you, we seek your God, and we have been sacrificing to him too. Who says no to free and volunteer labor that would usually cost a lot of finance, effort, and time to acquire it? It wasn't that simple though. A deeper research reveals that those same people who came and who wanted to help had a hidden agenda behind this act of generosity. Those were people who were imported from other nations into Samaria and into the region of the northern Israelite kingdom by the Assyrian king. They were indoctrinated into worshiping in the God of the land, which was Jehovah. However, the priests, with the ceremonies and theology, represented a big mix of present and past beliefs. And this was exactly the biggest fear that the Jews had, that they're going to make the same mistake as their forefathers. It must not happen. And that's why they kindly declined their offer for help.
One of the most successful weapons against God and his people is to recognize him, to accept his values, some theology, but also mix it with other beliefs and practices. This is a huge topic and very relevant today. But for this lesson, we are just going to note that it didn't work when they tried it with Zerubbabel. However, the opposition didn't give up.
What kind of opposition did the Jews encounter? First, the surrounding people set out to discourage those who were building. Second, they wanted to make them afraid when they go on building. And third, they lodged an accusation against the people of Judah. And fourth, they wrote a letter to Artaxerxes, which basically were saying that Jerusalem is a rebellious and wicked city. And they requested that a search is made in the archives in the royal palace that proves that Jerusalem was a rebellious city with troublesome kings and provinces, a place with a long history of sedition. What do the Jews do in response? The work on the house of the Lord in Jerusalem came to a standstill. It was stopped by force. And I wonder, could have they done differently?
The people got discouraged and stopped. Maybe they thought that it wasn't the right time now, or maybe that it wasn't really God's will to continue the work now. He would have intervened otherwise. We also have all kinds of explanations and excuses, but is it right? Do we hear a call? What do we need?
What do we do when we face opposition? Sometimes it's the closest people to us who make it hard for us to be who we are, who make it hard for us to follow our mission. Sometimes their actions are camouflaged, sometimes their actions are openly revealed against us. But both are equally strong and difficult to overcome. So what do we do when we face opposition? Nehemiah had no other choice, but he had to organize the people to build the wall with one hand, and with the other they held a weapon. And each of the builders wore his sword at his side as he worked. In other words, you have to do everything possible to complete the job. You have to make your best preparation for the work. The rest was laid before God in prayer. God will fight for us. Only if we continue forward in finishing what we have started, what we were building, regardless of opposition, we would know how God is fighting for us. Isn't that very much true? Because very often we just give up and we ask, where is God? Where was God? Where it was us doubting in Him that He's going to fight for us. It was us separating ourselves from Him.
Nehemiah here is a great example and inspiration. He didn't have much experience for the task to lead, motivate, strategize, build, fight, but he believed that it was God's call. Instead of getting discouraged, trust, be creative, be open, talk to God, do your best. It takes a fight. I don't think that the enemies were really intimidated so much by the military power and strength of the Jews, but they saw God among them. They saw this bond that made Israel a mighty nation before, and this is what they feared.
At the end, it is important to remind ourselves that in this world we will always find an opposition. We would always encounter an opposition of some sort. And we would always encounter enemies who would want what's ours. How do you respond? Where does your confidence come from? How far are you ready to go to accomplish what you believe in? All these are questions that need answers in our life.
One more thing in Nehemiah is very impressive, and is the last point of the lesson. He felt that he is doing a great work. Not so much that his efforts were great, but that the work that he was involved in was great. Do we have the same feeling and understanding? Do we see the work that God is involving us in as the greatest opportunity ever? This comes from a walk with God, from a real experience with Him. And it does make the whole difference in how we face opposition.
Next week we will continue our Sabbath school study with the lesson Violating the Spirit of the Law.